All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody. You know what time it is. It's time for another Artful Leadership interview. And today we've got a great guest that I'm going to tell you a little bit about in a minute. This is Valerie. Yeah. Hi, Valerie.
Hey,
Yay. So with the Artful Leadership interview series, what we've been really doing is tapping into the wisdom and the experiences and resources of artist leaders all across the nation who are giving their insights into this particular very interesting time that we're all in, and how we can bring an artful perspective to the challenges that we're facing. And my work is really about supporting educational leaders to prioritize their own well-being and center wellness and healing in their schools and organizations, and build a culture of community care that can really sustain students and staff through challenging times. So right now I'm thinking so much about all the transitions that educators are going through, with going on, from online now back to in-person or hybrid learning, and all the challenges that students and adults have experienced over the past year, and just looking at how can we support people to make that transition smoothly and center our humanity and our healing in that process. So I thought it would be really cool to bring Valerie Tutson in today, who is an expert storyteller, and she's going to share a little bit about her work and how storytelling can really support this time. So welcome. Tell us a little bit about
you,
you.
Rochelle. Thank you so much for having me. It is such a joy to be here with you, and just love the work that you're doing, and I'm really excited. So thank you very much. My dad says that when I was born, my mouth was open and my first words were, "Hi, Daddy." I think maybe they should have been "Once upon a time" or something like that, if I'm going to make up the story myself. But I've always had a love of stories and storytelling. I was the kid who lingered around the table when the grown-ups were talking after the meal was done, because that's when the good stuff got told. I was also the kid who loved the folklore section of the library in the small town that I grew up. There were not a lot of people of color in my little tiny town where I was. My brother and I were 2 of 18 kids of color in the entire school system, K to 12. So I didn't see myself represented, nor did I see much else of the world represented around me. But stories and the world of stories gave me glimpses into my own culture and history, as well as the vast, beautiful world that we get to be a part of. So I thought I was going to be the English teacher who directed the high school play. That's what I thought, because I knew I loved stories and I loved drama. But my senior year in high school, I saw my first professional storyteller that I knew of. And his name was David Holt, and he was out of North Carolina. And he, when I think about it, my mom had met him the night before, and she's like, "You got to go see this guy." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a senior in high school. Like, I want to go see a storyteller." Right? Especially I go in the auditorium, it's packed with second and third graders. And yeah, right? You can imagine. Hilarious. Their feet didn't even come all the way down to the ground in the chairs. They had been bussed up to the high school. And I skipped my class that day because I was a senior. I was going to be marching, not playing, pomp and circumstance. And out comes this ordinary white guy with a little hat on his head, harmonica around his neck, and literally a banjo in his arm. There was already a guitar preset on the stage. And he opened up his mouth, blew on that harmonica, and I was instantly transported. And I was amazed at how simple, in a way, that was, right? It was just one guy. He did have some instruments. I don't play anything when I tell stories, but he captured my imagination, and I found myself, in the Appalachian Mountains with him, riding on the back of a motorcycle with him. So I learned in that moment how powerful storytelling could be, and went on to go to college where I designed my own major called storytelling as a communications art. And have been telling, and then got another degree in theater arts, but have been working as a professional storyteller full time since 1991, which is shocking. I was only 2 when I started.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's like the long, kind of how I got into storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you just jumped right into that. So, since you were 2 and then decided to become a storyteller, you have a couple of organizations that you're involved with that are doing some really wonderful things with storytelling. Can you share a little bit about what that's looked like?
Absolutely. One of the organizations that I'm really involved in as the director of, I'm one of the co-founders of an organization called the Rhode Island Black Storytellers, otherwise known as RIBS. And we started 23 years ago to be an affiliate of the National Association of Black Storytellers. So I'm involved with the national organization. We've got our local affiliate. We started our local group right when I'd come back from South Africa, and there was an opportunity to participate in a program called I'll Make Me a World. And it was to promote Black artists and Black art forms in community. So the Black storytellers who were involved in another, multiracial storytelling group said, hey, let's do a festival. So we started what is called the Funda Fest. I had just come back from South Africa. Funda means to learn in Zulu, and it means to teach and to learn in Kiswahili. And so this, and also it looks like fun, right? You spell it F-U-N-D-A. And we know that in every culture, before we had reading, writing, before we had this kind of technology, everything that we needed to know came through stories, came through the storytellers. And so we created our festival, and we are 23 years strong, and we are broadening our organization. We're now offering monthly storytelling programs. We're doing trainings for youth. And we also do something that we call community flavors, where we invite community to come together to share food and stories, because we know that that is healing work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially right now, right? When we've been so isolated and everybody has experienced so many unreal things, right?
Yes.
During this time, there are so many stories to tell.
That's right.
And breaking bread and talking story and circling up. I mean, that's like the heart of humanity, right? Like that's what we do.
It is what we do. It's totally what we do. And that was, inspired several years ago. We invited a man by the name of Louis Mel Madrona, who is a Lakota and Cherokee traditional healer, who also has a Western medical degree from Columbia in psychiatry. And he wrote a book called Narrative Medicine. And he came, I had experienced him. I'd been to a workshop. I devoured his books. And he came to present to us a workshop called Storytelling. Let's see if I can remember it. Something like The Power of Storytelling to Heal Individuals and Community. And at the end, what he said was, basically, if you want your community to be well, you need to come together on a regular basis and simply share food and stories. So that's what we've been practicing over the years. And it's wonderful. And it's a great, everybody gets to sit at the same table in that way.
Yeah.
Right. There's room for every voice. Everybody's story gets to be told and heard. We have a lot of, everybody's talking about storytelling right now. And we have a lot of platforms where people can perform and present their stories, which is good.
Yeah.
Yet we also just need a place where we hold space to share together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm having all these different ideas coming to mind while you're talking. And I'm like, one of the things that I'm thinking about is, is this idea, this JEDI work that a lot of organizations and educators are doing with really centering justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion,
Yes.
and how important that storytelling piece is in that. And I was wondering, and I know that's one of your passions, and you already sort of rooted us in that in terms of your own experience as a young woman of color growing up in a white community, and just the importance of understanding one another and knowing each other's stories. Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely vital for me as a young person to have myself reflected. So when I became conscious as the storytelling work, one of the things that was important, I knew, was for there to be diverse faces and to be diverse stories that were shared. And we've moved, kind of along this spectrum of how we talk about it. So when I first got involved with storytelling, the language was around multiculturalism, right? And that meant oftentimes sharing the folk traditions of people, which I still think is really important. And I'll kind of come back to that, right? Because people's folk tales and folk traditions give us a diverse worldview.
Yes.
And that's really important if we're really talking about equity, because when we come together and we sit at a place, we want to make sure that there's space and room for all the different perspectives to have, to be amplified, right? To show up and have some space. And that means that it's going to be different and difficult, and that's okay, right? And stories in themselves hold that tension. So if we're talking about justice, some of it is, we know for sure there are people who have been disenfranchised for a really long time, and it's justice work to center those stories, right? And to put forth people who are doing that frontline work to help advance the cause of anti-racism or whatever language people are using. And we know that's also all over the spectrum. This notion of equity, giving people space for their stories, everybody on the same playing field. How wonderful is that? And when we have space for that, like I said, we're going to hear the diversity of the experiences, the worldviews, and that inclusion piece, to me, sort of might seem like what weaves it together, or maybe the icing on the cake. The icing on the cake for that. Yeah. And stories, here's the thing about with stories, especially people's own stories or their own experiences, right? Like if we were to talk about, tell me about your best friend when you were 7 years old. Everybody's got a story about that. Yeah. Right. And then if they begin to share it, we learn, if we're listening and paying attention, and that's what story calls us to do. If we're listening, we're going to learn something about that person's family system. We're going to hear something about that person's cultural community. What is their background? What games did they play? We're going to learn something about the kind of neighborhood that person lived in, right? All through a story. And you can't tell anybody that that's not true, because they know who their best friend was when they were 7 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't argue, right? Yes. You can't argue with someone's experience.
That's right.
And when we hear someone else's experience, we hear the feeling quality, and maybe the particulars of the circumstance might be different, but there's that emotional quality that pulls us in, that we can go, oh my gosh, I know how that feels.
Yes. Right?
And that's where we get that empathy, and we get compassion, and we get healing and connection, because suddenly you're not so different from me. you're human, and we have, those emotions that are universal, right?
Absolutely. Yes, you said that so perfectly. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think when I think about story, and this is, I'm still noshing on this, and maybe you have some help around it, because we talk about narrative a lot.
Yeah.
And I want us to think I want us to think juicier, right? Like with narrative, like what's the narrative? To me, that's like beginning, middle, and end, and which is fine.
Yeah. Or the
But
spin, right? Like,
yeah, with a spin or this or that. But story is fat and juicy and allows for the warts. It allows for the contradictions, which are who we are. Humans by nature. We are contradictory. Like we hold all the good, the bad, all of it, if we're honest, is in us. And and that's why when I was saying before about the folk traditions, right? Or those mythic stories, they help us remember that it isn't a flat experience, right? We're not an either or, we're all of that.
Right. Right. So to kind of root us back into, this time, these moments that we're living in right now, where it's really time to make some change in our world, and to really center those stories, and to change the way we do business so that all voices are included. If we're kind of like drilling that down to like organizations and schools who are working with young people right now, and they're trying to make sure students are socially and emotionally healthy, they're included, they're dealing with all these transitions. I feel like it's such an incredible opportunity for story to really facilitate that transition. I'm imagining schools, coming back together and having classrooms just have these storytelling sessions of just like, what are your stories about the pandemic? What are your stories about, and just having those spaces, like, what are your thoughts, or do you have any tips or anything like that about how things like that might help?
I think that's a really, really good point, Rochelle, because we've been readjusting to connecting in this way, and it's going to be an adjustment to connect in physical space again.
Yeah.
And some of the things that I would suggest as a tip, sometimes if we just say, oh, what are your stories? Like, that's way too big. Like, I don't have any stories. Like, that's what I would hear from my parent. I don't have any stories. What are you talking about?
Or I have a story that's way too big or vulnerable, or that I'm not just going to tell you right now.
Right. Yes. So that is a key. That is really true. I like to use just a little prompt where I start with, I remember, and then I might throw out a word like, if we're talking about what was your time in your pandemic, or, well, I remember when I first heard school was going to be shut down. If you give that kind of opening, and then what I like to do, just to do a little, what I call priming the pump, is just give people 30 seconds to say that prompt and then say whatever comes to mind, right? Because again, nobody can tell you what you remember is wrong, because it's your remembering. And the 30 seconds can be a little bit long, maybe initially, but once that pump gets primed, people will start to share, and then you cut them off, which is good, because then they're like, oh, okay. And then you give them, and then what's the next prompt, so that everybody's voice can kind of go through. But think about those specific things. You could do something like the meals we ate. I remember the food when it was pandemic time, or I remember, right, all of a sudden what just popped in my head as I said that was oh my God, I didn't get to go to the grocery store. And what I remember is my friends who knew that I was home with a baby and couldn't go to the store began to ask me for my grocery list and drop off groceries to me. And I remember that friends who were working where they were giving away food would come and bring me food to my house. There were hot meals delivered on Fridays, right? Like I hadn't even thought about that just now until I said that.
That little prompt is like a little key, right? It's like a key that unlocks things. It's so funny because while we're talking, I was thinking a great prompt would be like, I remember the toilet paper shortage. And you know, that like feeling of going down the aisle and just being like, oh my God, what's happening here? Like every paper product is gone. And I remember posting something about it on Facebook, and a friend showed up in the rain outside my apartment with a trench coat and like a pack of toilet paper. And I did this whole delivery, you know, and it's like, those kinds of things can be such a wonderful bonding and grounding experience when kids are coming back on campus.
That's right.
Being like, oh, we all went through some shit.
We did. And you know, the other thing that's great about that too is that the teachers or the counselors or whoever can also participate.
Yeah.
You know, again, it's that creating space, that equity space, that inclusion space for every voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I recommend that kind of work, and it doesn't take long. You know what I mean? Like you could do that every day for, or whenever there's a lull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's so good. And I'm just like sitting with it for a minute because as I was thinking about talking with you, I was like, this really could be so powerful because there's still so many rules in terms of like, you know, when students are going back, they still have to be distanced. They still have to have their mask on. They, you know, playing games or roughhousing or different things we can't do still as much. And there are folks who, like, I was hearing a story yesterday about teachers who are now part-time in their classroom, but they're still on Zoom with kids at home, and there's 6 to 10 kids in their classroom who are on Zoom with them in the room.
Yes.
You know, it's like this surreal nature of what is happening in schools. And so how could like a playful approach or a fun approach with storytelling like kind of like liven that up and get us back into our humanity and our shared, you know, experience there?
And you know, I haven't really, have I done that with some people on Zoom and some people, but I've played that game even through the computer. You know what I mean? Saying, I know that you're not really, you know, going to be able to tell that I'm looking at you, but, you know, I'm going to come here and I'm going to interact with this screen as if I'm interacting with you. And I think one of the other things that we've, you know, gotten really good at over the course of this pandemic is we're zoomed out.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to sometimes turn off that screen and we're doing this and doing that. But for short times, if we can interact with the screen in a different way, you know, it can help us I'm making up this word, re-embody ourselves, remember our bodiness, even in this space. But yeah, that could be really fun with the, okay, here we go. I see you over here, you know, pretending I have an iPad, looking at myself, looking at you on Zoom.
Right.
Yeah.
So important. So, is that, I'm curious for you, you also do some work, or you're interested in maybe doing some work. You were telling me about a group program or like things that you want to be able to do around this JEDI work. Like what else you got that you want to tell this audience about that you're working on or that you have available for folks?
Yes. I've been doing a program with a colleague of mine at the Rhode Island Black Storytellers. We've been exploring storytelling with a company here, based here in Rhode Island, Cox Communications. Some people will
Yep.
know. And so we've just been, and this came through their diversity, their D&I people.
Yep.
And so this is where we've been beginning to, with their group, first of all, share stories from different perspectives, right? So as two Black women coming in and making sure we're sharing stories that are representative of our culture, right? As they're trying to broaden their education experiences for their people. And then gradually bringing in some of these kinds of opportunities for people to also share their own voices. So this is the kind of thing that I can offer for companies, and we would work together to see how it is they want to use it. This company in particular wanted to start with the educational piece, feeling like we don't know very much and we need to diversify what it is we know. But again, as you and I have been talking, we know that the ultimate value is when when storytelling in general is recognized as a tool for voices, right? Yeah. For that equitable space. Yeah. So there's that kind of thing. The other piece that I've been personally working on myself, I'm calling right now faithful storytelling. And this is taking people through a process of reconnecting with their own stories, as we were just talking about, I remember. Because in this time, as much as we're connecting in this way, I think many of us are really feeling disconnected. We're not necessarily feeling grounded on the earth where we stand. We're moving from Zoom to Zoom. How do we reconnect with our own memories, our own heart, our own experience? And then in that same way, once we're feeling really connected with ourselves, how do we then listen to one another and make space for that deep listening? Because half of good storytelling is really listening. So how can we practice that? And then through that journey, I do a lot of work in faith-based organizations. So then how do people connect with their faith, sense of spirit, and those stories that are connected with that? So I'm going to be offering a program called Faithful Storytelling. Which will be kind of an experiment, but I'm looking for people who are interested. I just did, I do this a lot in live person retreats, but I just did a virtual one. And so we're going to work on, that'll be a couple of months. That'll be a 9-month program, actually. So we can go from ourselves to connecting to one another, to connecting to higher power, to using this as a way to really foster community.
Oh, sounds beautiful. And I'm thinking about one of the things that I do with my business, Artful Leadership Coaching and Consulting, is I do a lot of holding space for educators and youth leaders, teaching artists to come and really prioritize their own well-being, because they're out here giving all the time to young people. And especially right now, they've been dealing with, so many crazy transitions with the pandemic and so many challenges. And one of the things that we found, like I started holding these spaces, and I would come with all this plan of like, we're going to do this activity, we're going to do that and talk about this and learn. And people just want to come and share about, this is what's going on with me, and they want to hear somebody else's vulnerable share. And so my partner and I, Ann Davis, have decided to just hold a monthly space. It's just like a sacred self-care circle where we're just going to come and talk story, and we might move and meditate and make art and dance, and we do all these things. We burn stuff. We do all kinds of things. Yeah. But I'm thinking we might have to invite you to come and like host.
I would love that
storytelling stuff, because I think it would be so meaningful, and people have experienced so much, and we don't need to do anything about it. Sometimes people just need to be held in that space of, I hear you, I see you,
Yes.
I acknowledge what you've been through, here's what I've been through, let's do it together. Like, nobody should be alone in this crazy mess, you know.
Totally, I agree, because especially as the Zooming world has, you know, come on, it's been so much information dump and webinars, and you know, you can learn about this and learn about that, and right, and then what? Whew, how do we synthesize it? You know, how do we? And now spring is coming, right? So it's making all, I mean, I'm cold here today, but over here in New England, it's cold, you know, but as we prepare for that, you know, to mulch our soil, to mulch our own experience, drink in all that, which helps us remember how to be human on this planet. Yeah. It's important and good work.
It really is. It really is. And I'm excited about what you're doing, and I'm excited, and we didn't mention this, but Valerie and I met in a women's business program, Women Rocking Business. And we were just so excited to meet each other and feel this like common core of healing through community building and connection, and story is such an important part of that.
Story and the arts.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a fun thing that I do at the end of these talks where we just do kind of like a rapid fire of like a round of fun little questions. So I'm going to pull these up really quick.
A quiz?
I think that because you're a storyteller, I'm assuming you're probably pretty good at improv. So you can probably just like, I'm just going to rapid fire a few things. One of the things that's been a hot topic on this little show here has been self-care, right? And so if just top of mind, what is your favorite pick-me-up or go-to self-care activity when you need a little self-love?
Of late, it has been a hot bubble bath in the middle of the day, and I have to do it before my toddler comes home. And the other second new self-care thing I've been doing is I bring my little coffee tray up into my bedroom, and every morning I make myself coffee in bed. Oh, can I say?
That sounds very luxurious. I love that little, that sounds so cozy. Okay, next rapid fire. A current thought leader or author or speaker or artist who is really inspiring you? Is there somebody that you've been exposed to in recent times that you're loving?
This is what just popped in my head. And this is one of my storytelling mentors. We did a program on Sunday, and she was quoting, oh Lord, I don't know who she quoted. Somebody's going to have to look it up. But what she said was, the future is behind us and the past is in front of us. And I've just been chewing on that. Like, that's, if we're talking about a line of, you know, elders to us, to young people, the future is behind us, right? Doesn't that just flip everything?
And who was this that said this?
Well, my friend who said it is Ramona Bass Colabay, and she's a storyteller here in Rhode Island. Her late husband was George Houston Bass, who was the personal secretary to Langston Hughes. And they're both, he's passed now, but she's still one of my greatest teachers. Maybe I should look it up, because I don't know who she was quoting. But anyway, you said rapid fire. So there you go. Somebody else, Google, ask grandmother Google.
Yeah.
You know what else I'm reading that is totally inspiring me right now is The Promised Land, Obama's book.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff.
Really good. Again, just reminding me of, so much of what I've thought and believed, right? Like we can live up to this ideal that we are created equal, and that all of this is for all of us.
Yeah.
And just kind of that promise that was such a big part of that swell. I've been inspired to read him and his perspective on it, also having been out of office. So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's see. What is something that you wish all educators knew?
That even middle schoolers want to hear stories. All of us want to hear stories, and we want to hear your stories. We want to hear, we just are hungry for stories, and they work. Sometimes people will say middle schoolers don't want to hear stories, but I tell you, they're like, Miss, are you going to tell me another? Are you going to tell us stories?
Yeah.
We want that. We want to be transported, and to trust that the oral tradition is enough. Like we don't need all of the screens. We don't need images for everything. Yeah. That if we indulge ourselves in the imagery that comes with storytelling and poetry, like that's enough.
It's so rich. And that's something that I have found that is kind of a lost piece in this world of screens, is just the imagination. Yes. Right? It's just being transported in our own imagination together is so powerful and such a beautiful gift to give to students. I think that's so important for educators, bringing their passion, bringing their stories. Those are the things that inspired me when I was a kid, was teachers who were like, I went to Machu Picchu, or I went and traveled and I did this, or I learned how to surf when I was 45, or, and I was like, I want to be like you. Those are the things that stick. So absolutely. I love that message. Like everybody wants the story. Bring your story.
Yeah.
Bring it to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I feel like that's a beautiful place to wrap this up. I feel like we could talk for a long time, and we will. We'll talk some more. And I'm serious. I would love to see if there's a way to collaborate and bring your gifts to this group that I'm working with. I think we would love to have you.
I would love that. And vice versa. Our storytellers we're meeting weekly, and we just talked about really wanting to share, resources and skills and ways of approaching things. So there's a lot that we can do, and I'm grateful.
Yeah. So go out there and tell your stories, folks, and share some with us, and we will see you all soon. Great to have you, Valerie. I'll see you soon.
Okay, Rochelle, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care.